They say betrayal doesn't come from your enemies, it comes from the people you once trusted with your very heartbeat. The taxi slowed in front of my 2-story colonial house in Atlanta, Georgia, the one James and I had spent 30 years restoring brick by brick. The roses I planted with my bare hands still bloomed along the walkway. Though neglected from my 3 weeks in the hospital, I leaned on my cane, my hip still aching from surgery, and whispered to myself, home at last. But home had changed. The front door opened before I reached it. My son, Daniel, stood in the doorway, his face stiff, cold, and strangely distant. Behind him, I glimpsed his wife Vanessa, all polished blonde hair and designer perfume. And, was that her parents lounging on my sofa like royalty? Daniel, I smiled weakly, reaching forward. I'm back. His reply was a blow harder than any scalpel. You shouldn't have come. This house is no longer yours. For a moment, the cane was the only thing keeping me upright. I thought I misheard. Surely the son I had raised alone after James passed wouldn't say those words. But his jaw was set, his eyes as merciless as a banker calling in a loan. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice quivering between disbelief and rising anger. The documents are signed. The house belongs to us now. You'll need to find somewhere else to live. Behind him, Vanessa stepped into view, flashing the emerald earrings James gave me on our 25th anniversary as if they had always been hers. Her syrupy voice was poison wrapped in silk. Don't worry, Margaret, we packed your things already. They're in boxes in the garage. My hospital papers crinkled in my coat pocket. But my heart tore louder than any paper ever could. I had walked up to my home expecting warmth and family. But instead, I was about to uncover a betrayal so calculated it would make even the devil jealous. And this was only the beginning. For a second, I thought it was some cruel joke. Daniel had always been the boy who begged for fairness in Monopoly. The teenager who swore honesty mattered more than winning. Now his voice was colder than the hospital tiles I had just left. Daniel, I whispered, tightening my grip on the cane. I never signed this house away. Your father and I built it. Every brick, every nail carries his name. Where are those papers you're talking about? He shifted, avoiding my eyes. Avoidance, the oldest tell in the book. I thought, my years in banking compliance flashing back. That's when Vanessa slinked closer, her perfume hitting me like cheap champagne at a bad wedding. Oh, Margaret, don't be dramatic. You signed power of attorney before your surgery. Remember? Daniel was just doing what was best for you. This house is far too much for one woman to manage. Her words slithered around me, but my gaze locked on the sparkling emeralds in her ears. My emeralds, my anniversary gift. Something inside me snapped. You tricked me, I said, my voice low and trembling, not from weakness, but from rage. From the living room, Edward Moore, Vanessa's father, strolled in like a man inspecting his new kingdom. Tall, silver-haired, smug enough to curdle milk. His wife Sylvia followed, her face wearing the same look she used when she once called my home quaint. I'm sorry it came to this. Edward sighed, not looking sorry at all. Daniel made the arrangements. Everything's legal. Legal? I snapped. You have no idea who you're playing with. I spent 30 years catching fraudsters twice as slick as you before I retired. You don't steal from me and walk away smiling. For the first time, Vanessa's smirk faltered. Good. Let her see there was still fire under this gray hair. They thought they had buried me under stacks of paperwork and false signatures. What they didn't know was that I had claws, and I was about to dig my way out. One revelation at a time. The taxi that had dropped me off was already turning the corner. For a wild second, I wanted to scream for the driver to come back, to haul me away from this nightmare. But no, running was what they expected. I straightened my shoulders, ignoring the dull fire in my hip. You can box up my belongings, I said, my voice icy, but you'll never box up James's memory. This house still breathes him. Daniel's expression hardened, like he was bracing himself against guilt. Mom, please, don't make this harder. It's already done. Done? I shot back. Daniel, do you even hear yourself? You're evicting your own mother like she's a squatter. And for what? For them? I jerked my chin toward Edward and Sylvia. who were standing like smug vultures waiting for the carcass to fall. Vanessa's smile returned, sharp as glass. You're not being reasonable. This is what's best for everyone. I almost laughed. Best for everyone? Or best for her manicure budget? A silence fell so thick I could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. That clock had belonged to my parents. It had survived 2 moves, 3 grandchildren, and a house fire. Now it stood witness to this, my own son shutting the door in my face. I leaned on my cane and said softly, almost to myself, "You'll regret this." Their faces shifted, confused at my calmness. Let them wonder, because while they thought they'd already won, I was already thinking of Caroline Brooks, my college roommate turned high-powered attorney. She once told me, always keep a plan B, Margaret, especially when family is involved. And I had, as I turned my back on the house I had built with love. They thought I was leaving defeated. What they didn't know was that I was walking straight into plan B, and that plan would bring their empire crashing down. The hotel room smelled faintly of bleach and lemon polish. Too clean to feel like a refuge. But at least it wasn't tainted by betrayal. I sat on the stiff mattress, my cane leaning against the nightstand, my hands trembling not from pain, but fury. I dialed the number I knew by heart. Caroline, I whispered when she picked up. It's time. There was no hesitation on her end. Where are you? She asked. Her voice crisp, sharp, the kind of voice that could cut through a courtroom like a scalpel. Downtown Marriott, room 608. Stay put. I'll be there in 20 minutes. When Caroline Brooks walked into that room, it felt like the cavalry had arrived, dressed in a tailored navy suit and heels that could double as weapons. Her silver-streaked bun hadn't moved since the Reagan administration, and her eyes burned with controlled fire. Those miserable vultures, she hissed as she hugged me gently, careful of my healing hip. Tell me everything, Margaret, don't leave out a single comma. I did, from Daniel's cold words to Vanessa's smug smirk, to the way Edward had strutted across my hardwood floors like a Wall Street banker on bonus day. Caroline listened without interrupting, her pen scratching across legal pads like thunder. When I finished, she snapped her pad shut. They think they're clever, but they're sloppy. You gave them power of attorney for medical decisions. They twisted it into financial control. That's fraud. My lips pressed tight. And the money? I can feel it. Caroline, they've been bleeding my accounts while I was laid up in that hospital bed. Her eyes narrowed. Then we follow the money. We build the paper trail, piece by piece, and when the hammer falls, they'll wish they'd never laid eyes on this house. For the first time that day, I felt something warm in my chest. Not hope exactly, but the first ember of revenge. I thought losing my home was the worst betrayal. But Caroline was about to uncover something darker, something that would prove my eviction was only the beginning of their twisted scheme. Caroline spread a stack of bank statements across the hotel desk we'd turned into a war room. I pulled these through contacts at the credit bureau, she said, tapping one page with a perfectly manicured nail. My eyes scanned the numbers. Then I froze. 5 transfers, all neatly spaced over 3 weeks. Each one over $40,000. Each one forged with my digital signature while I'd been lying half-conscious in a hospital bed. They drained over 200 grand. I whispered, my voice shaking. Money James and I saved for retirement. For emergencies. I stopped. No words could finish that sentence. Caroline slid me a glass of water. And that's not the worst part. I gave her a sharp look. You mean there's worse? Oh yes. She opened a folder and laid out photographs of property deeds, all signed under Sterling Investment Properties LLC. Edward and Sylvia Moore weren't just freeloading in my house, they were buying up my whole neighborhood like it was Monopoly. My stomach twisted as I read familiar names, the Millers, the Hendersons, the old couple on the corner who used to bring me peach cobbler every Christmas. They're predators, Caroline said flatly. And they're using your accounts as their starter fund. I gripped the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles turned white. The betrayal had metastasized from a personal wound into something monstrous. This wasn't just about me anymore. My neighbors, my community, they were all prey. I leaned back, my anger burning steady and cold. Then we stopped them. We don't just take back my house. We burn down their entire empire." Caroline's lips curved into a dangerous smile. "That's the Margaret Cole I remember. They thought I was just one old woman. Broken and disposable. But they had no idea I once made fraudsters cry for mercy, and I was about to remind them exactly who I was." The next morning, Caroline arrived with 2 lattes and a stack of files so thick it could have doubled as a murder weapon. She set them on the table with a thud. "Margaret, you need to see this," she said. I braced myself. With Caroline, "You need to see this," usually meant something that would ruin your breakfast. She opened her laptop and pulled up county records. My heart lurched as I recognized the street names, my street. Highlighted in yellow were property after property, all purchased in the last 6 months under Sterling Investment Properties. "Their goal isn't just your house," Caroline explained. "They're pushing for a zoning change. If they flip this block from residential to mixed-use commercial, the property value triples overnight." I nearly dropped my latte. "So, let me get this straight. They steal my money, buy out my neighbors, and then turn our community into their personal gold mine?" Caroline nodded grimly. "They've done it before in Dallas. Complaints mysteriously disappeared. Investigations dropped. They've greased a lot of palms." I laughed bitterly. Vanessa always said she wanted to live somewhere more upscale. Guess she meant bulldozing my rose garden to make room for a Starbucks. Caroline leaned forward. "This isn't just greed, Margaret. It's organized fraud. We'll need more than angry speeches, we need evidence. Recordings, documents, anything that ties Daniel and Vanessa directly to the scheme." At the sound of Daniel's name, something inside me twisted. My son, my flesh and blood. Had he really thrown in his lot with these vipers, or was he just too weak to resist? I clenched my cane tighter. "Then we'll give them rope. Enough to hang themselves." Caroline smirked, spoken like a woman ready for war. I wasn't just fighting for my house anymore, I was fighting for an entire neighborhood. And to win, I'd have to outsmart my own son before he realized his mother was the enemy. 3 days later, Caroline and I upgraded from the sterile Marriott room to an extended stay suite, cozier, quieter, and easier to turn into command central. The curtains stayed drawn, the whiteboard filled with scribbles, arrows, and names circled in red like we were plotting a crime show. Except the crime was real, and I was the victim. Caroline clicked through surveillance photos her investigator contact had delivered. One image made my heart clench: Daniel and Vanessa, walking into a downtown bank arm in arm. The timestamp? 2 days after my surgery, when I was barely lucid enough to remember my own name. "They accessed your safe deposit box," Caroline explained. "Took original deeds, trust papers, everything James left in your care." My throat went dry. That safe box had been James's pride. He once told me, "If anything ever happens, Maggie, this is our shield." Now my own son had opened it like a candy jar. Caroline pulled up another file. "It gets worse. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit already has the Moors on their radar. Mortgage scams, predatory loans, classic elder exploitation. Your case could be the nail in their coffin." I gave a humorless laugh. "Poetic. Using me as bait to catch bigger rats." "Not bait," Caroline corrected sharply. "A hammer." I stared at the photos again. Daniel's face frozen in mid-smile beside Vanessa's. For years, that boy had clung to my hand at night, begging me not to let go after his father died. And now, this. "Do you think he understands what he's part of?" I asked quietly. Caroline hesitated. "That's the question only he can answer. But Margaret, don't let hope blind you. Right now, he's standing on their side of the line." I swallowed hard, the truth bitter as medicine. "Then we drag him across, or bury him where he stands." The line between justice and revenge was getting thinner by the hour, and soon I'd have to decide which side of that line I was willing to walk. By the end of that week, Caroline and I had enough paperwork to wallpaper the entire suite. Every file screamed fraud, forged signatures, inflated appraisals, shady shell companies with names so bland they practically begged for suspicion: Sunrise Holdings LLC, Greenleaf Ventures, Orion Properties. Classic camouflage, Caroline muttered, flipping through the stack. Hide the poison inside something boring. I rubbed my temple, the dull throb of my healing hip reminding me I wasn't as invincible as I used to be. So how do we nail them? Walk into the FBI office with a binder thicker than the Bible? Caroline smirked. Tempting, but no, we need them caught in the act. That's the kind of evidence juries love: recordings, eyewitness accounts, documents in their own handwriting. The idea made my stomach flip. So you want me to walk back into that house? She met my eyes. Eventually, yes. You know their routines. Vanessa's salon every Tuesday, Edward's golf on Thursdays, Sylvia's bridge club, God help whoever sits across from her. And Daniel. She trailed off. Predictable as sunrise. I finished bitterly. My son kept a calendar tighter than the Pentagon's. He'd be gone by 5. Home by 6. No surprises. His reliability had once been comforting. Now, it was ammunition. Caroline leaned back, folding her arms. The question is, do you have the stomach to face them again? I stared at the ceiling. Did I? To walk back into the house where James and I built our life, knowing it was crawling with vipers? To look my son in the eye and see betrayal staring back? I picked up my cane and tapped it twice on the floor. A sound sharp enough to cut the silence. Stomach? No. But fire? Yes. And fire burns better than fear. Caroline grinned, the kind of grin that made opposing attorneys sweat. Then it settled. We build the trap, and when it snaps shut, not even Daniel will see it coming. The house they thought they had stolen wasn't just mine, it was about to become the stage for their downfall. The plan came together like one of James's old puzzles, messy at first, then suddenly clear once the corners were in place. Caroline called in favors from her network, a forensic accountant who owed her 2 dinners, a tech expert who could clone hard drives faster than I could bake cornbread, and an FBI contact who promised to stay off the record until it's worth going on the record. Meanwhile, I played my part, the grieving widow turned invisible old woman. Let them believe I was broken. Let them believe I'd slink away quietly. That was my camouflage. On a chilly Tuesday afternoon, I found myself sitting in a nondescript sedan 2 blocks from my own house. Caroline sat beside me, scrolling through her phone, while the tech guy wired up a discreet recorder smaller than a lipstick tube. Just clip it to your cane, he explained. Looks like nothing, but it'll pick up every word in a 20-foot radius. I raised a brow. So my cane is now both support and surveillance. James would have loved that. Caroline chuckled. James always did say you'd make a better spy than a banker. I forced a smile, but inside my chest, my heart thudded. I hadn't stepped foot in that house since Daniel slammed the door on me. Every fiber of my being wanted to stay away. But this wasn't about comfort anymore, it was about justice. When the tech guy left, Caroline gripped my hand. Margaret, listen to me. The moment you feel unsafe, you press this button. She handed me a small black device with a single red switch. It pings the FBI directly. Backup will be minutes away. I slid it into my coat pocket. You think they'll hurt me? She didn't blink. I think desperate people do desperate things. I stared out the windshield at the house I once called home. The roses were gone, replaced by cold, sculpted shrubs. My porch swing, where James and I once planned our future, was missing. It looked less like a home and more like a stage waiting for its final act. I wasn't walking back into that house to reclaim memories, I was walking in to light the fuse. And when it blew, it would take every last one of them down with it. I approached the side door. The one Daniel used to sneak through as a teenager when he thought I didn't notice. The key still worked, because of course it did. They'd been so arrogant, they never even bothered to change the locks. Inside, the air felt different. My lavender sachets had been replaced by the sharp scent of expensive candles. The walls I once painted soft cream now wore a harsh, modern gray. It wasn't my home anymore. It was their lair. Voices drifted from my study. I crept closer, my cane clicking softly against the hardwood floor, recording every sound. The Henderson property closes Friday. Edward Moore's voice said, smooth and smug. That'll put us over 40% ownership on the block. Once zoning's approved, we'll have this neighborhood in our pocket. Another voice chimed in, unfamiliar. Male. Nervous. And the financing? Clean. Edward boasted. We used Margaret's banking credentials. No red flags. My pulse spiked. My name. My credentials. My life being weaponized against my neighbors. I tightened my grip on the cane and pushed the door open. 3 heads snapped toward me. Edward froze behind James's antique desk. His partner stiffened by the window. And for once, that arrogant smirk slid off Edward's face. Hello, Edward, I said, my voice cool as steel. Discussing business in my study? Margaret, he sputtered, standing too quickly. This is unexpected. How did you get in? Through the door, I replied dryly. The same door to the house that still belongs to me. His partner glanced at the exit. Maybe I should come back later. No need, I cut him off, stepping further inside. I just came to pick up some personal papers. The ones you're using to rob half this neighborhood. The room went still, the weight of my accusation hanging heavier than the chandelier above us. Edward thought he was the predator and I was the prey, but tonight, he was about to learn just how dangerous a cornered woman could be. Edward recovered quickly, plastering that fake sympathy back onto his face. Margaret, you've been under stress. Your surgery, the medication, surely you're confused. Daniel told us about your fragile state of mind. My blood boiled, but my voice stayed calm. My mind is perfectly clear. Clear enough to know you've been forging documents with my name on them. Color drained from his cheeks. I walked to the filing cabinet in the corner, James's filing cabinet. The one he used to call his fortress of truth. I pulled open the top drawer and flipped through folders. The Henderson financing, I said, pulling one free, signed with my credentials. Funny, I don't remember closing that deal while sedated in the ICU. His partner muttered, Mr. Moore, I think I should. Sit down, Edward barked. I turned, phone raised in my hand. The recording app glowed like a tiny lantern in the dark. Don't worry, Edward, I already have what I need. Your voice on tape, admitting to using my banking reputation. His eyes widened, then narrowed with fury. Give me that phone. I tucked it against my chest. Not a chance. In 2 strides, he lunged forward, his hand clamping around my arm, squeezing so hard my cane clattered to the floor. Pain shot up my healing hip. But I refused to cry out. Instead, I raised my chin and said loudly, Let go of me, he snarled, trying to rip the phone away. You're not leaving this room with that recording. And then, FBI, hands where we can see them. The front door burst open. Agents in navy jackets swarmed through the hallway. Guns drawn, voices booming. Edward froze, his grip still on me. Until one agent barked, Release her, now. His hand slipped away, but his face was pure venom. The trap had sprung, and Edward Moore was caught. But little did I know. The real battle was only just beginning, with my own son. The agents moved with military precision, one securing Edward, another cuffing his jittery partner against the wall. Papers fluttered to the floor as James's antique desk was cleared for evidence. The chaos almost drowned out the pounding in my chest. Mrs. Cole, one of the agents said firmly, guiding me toward the doorway. Are you all right? I nodded, though my hip throbbed from Edward's grip. Better now, I managed. Then I lifted the phone still clutched in my hand. And I think you'll want this. The agent smiled grimly. That recording just made our night. As Edward was marched past me in handcuffs. He leaned close, his breath hot and bitter in my ear. You've ruined everything, old woman, but you won't survive the fallout. I stared him down, steady as bedrock. Funny, you said the same thing about my garden roses. They're still blooming. He was shoved out the door before he could reply. Caroline arrived minutes later, breathless, her heels clicking like a battle drum. When she saw me standing in the middle of my reclaimed study, she exhaled in relief. Good Lord, Margaret, you nearly gave me a heart attack. I allowed myself a small smile. You told me once, always keep a plan B tonight. Plan B wore pearls and carried a cane. She chuckled despite herself. You're impossible. The agents collected evidence long into the night. Every folder, every laptop, every scrap of paper. I watched, arms crossed, as they dismantled the Moors' little empire piece by piece. But beneath my satisfaction was a deeper dread. Because Daniel wasn't here, and when he found out what had happened, he wouldn't just see criminals being arrested, he'd see his mother standing on the other side. I had just helped tear down the Moors' empire. But the question lingered like smoke, when my son looked at me now. Would he see justice, or betrayal? The FBI office felt nothing like triumph. Beige walls, buzzing fluorescent lights, the smell of burnt coffee, it was more DMV than Victory Parade. I sat in an interview room, my hip aching, while Agent Callahan flipped through my statement. "Your recording is gold," he said finally, "combined with the forged documents Ms. Brooks provided. We'll have no trouble securing warrants for the rest of the Moors' properties." Caroline squeezed my hand under the table. "Told you," she whispered, but my mind wasn't celebrating. It was circling one name, over and over. Daniel. "What about my house?" I asked. My voice cracked despite me. Callahan's tone softened. "A judge has already issued an emergency freeze. No transfers, no sales. Legally, no one can touch it until ownership is clarified." Relief washed over me, quick but fragile. My house was safe, for now. And my son? I forced the question out, though it burned on my tongue. Callahan hesitated, then closed his notebook. "Mrs. Cole, we'll need to assess his involvement. The documents show his signature. The recordings reference his cooperation. We'll have to bring him in." The words landed like stones. Bring him in, my Daniel, my baby boy who once begged me to cut the crusts off his sandwiches. Caroline leaned forward. "Agents, you should know, Daniel may have been manipulated by Vanessa and her parents." "That matters." "Maybe," Callahan said carefully, "but the law cares about actions, not excuses." I pressed my hands together, steadying the tremor in my fingers. Justice was what I wanted. Justice was what I fought for. But when justice meant my son in handcuffs, could I bear it? The Moors were finally cornered. But the next name on the list wasn't theirs, it was my son's. And I had to decide if I was ready to watch him fall. 3 hours later, I sat in the back of an unmarked FBI sedan parked across from my own house. The agents had insisted I ride along, partly for protection, partly because they knew I wasn't about to miss what came next. The neighborhood looked the same, lawns trimmed, porches glowing with evening lights, but nothing felt normal. My house, the one James and I had built with sweat and patience, stood as the center of a storm. Headlights appeared down the block. A convoy of government vehicles rolled up, silent and sure. Agents poured out, jackets marked in bold yellow, FBI. "Federal agents, we have a warrant." Their voices cut through the evening calm. The front door opened. Vanessa stood framed in the doorway, a perfect blend of confusion and outrage. "Excuse me? What is this about?" Behind her, Daniel appeared, his tie loosened after a long day at the office. When his eyes found me standing behind the agents, his entire body jolted. "Mom?" His voice cracked like a boy again. "What's going on?" The lead agent spoke clearly. "Your wife and her parents are under investigation for large-scale financial fraud. We're here to seize evidence." Daniel turned to Vanessa, his face pale. She didn't flinch. Instead, she hissed like a cornered cat. "This is ridiculous. My father will crush every one of you in court." "Your father is already in custody," I said, stepping forward, cane striking the pavement. "And soon, so will you." Neighbors gathered on their lawns, whispers carrying through the twilight. The perfect facade Vanessa had built was crumbling, and for the first time, she couldn't fake her way out. Daniel's gaze snapped back to me, a mix of betrayal and fear. "Mom, you did this?" My throat tightened, but my voice stayed firm. "No, Daniel, they did this. I just stopped it before they destroyed everyone else." Vanessa's fury was boiling. Daniel's confusion was unraveling, and I knew the real battle hadn't even started. Because when the truth came out, my son would have to choose which side of the line he stood on. Vanessa's mask cracked at last. Her manicured hands trembled as 2 agents stepped inside, pulling open drawers, unplugging laptops, bagging every scrap of evidence. She spun toward Daniel, her voice shrill enough to rattle the windows. "Don't just stand there, do something." Daniel looked like a man caught between a fire and a flood. His eyes darted from his furious wife to me, his mother, standing tall behind the federal agents. "Mom?" His voice broke, pleading, "You didn't have to call them. We could have worked this out as a family." "Family?" I shot back, cane tapping hard against the porch. "You locked me out of my own house. You drained my accounts while I was in a hospital bed. Tell me, Daniel, what part of that sounds like family to you?" He winced as if the words themselves were blows. "I didn't know it would go this far." "That's the problem," I said coldly. "You knew enough." An agent gestured toward Vanessa. "Mrs. Moore, you'll need to come with us." Her composure shattered. "This is harassment. You'll hear from my lawyer." The agent didn't blink. "Then tell it to the judge." Vanessa's eyes found me again, blazing with venom. "You think you've won, Margaret? My father has connections. You're nothing but a bitter old woman clinging to a house no one wants." I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she and Daniel could hear. "No one wants? Vanessa, this house was built with love. And love leaves deeper roots than greed ever could. That's why you'll never truly own it." For a moment, her fury flickered into fear. Daniel swallowed hard, torn in two. "Mom, what's going to happen to us?" The agents had their suspects. The neighbors had their scandal, but I still had a choice to make. Was I ready to see my only son face the same handcuffs that had just closed around his wife? The agents marched Vanessa down the front steps, her heels clattering against the wood, her voice rising in a furious stream of legal threats and empty promises. Neighbors watched from their porches, some whispering, others filming with their phones. For once, Vanessa's designer polish couldn't mask the truth. She was trapped. Daniel stood frozen in the doorway, staring after her. His lips moved but no words came out, as though his whole world had been ripped open in an instant. Agent Callahan turned to him. "Mr. Cole, we'll need you to come with us for questioning as well." Daniel's head snapped toward me, panic flashing in his eyes. "Mom, please, tell them I didn't know. Tell them I didn't mean for this to happen." Every memory of him came rushing back, the boy who cried when he lost his first dog. The teenager who begged me to stay up late telling him stories when James was on business trips. The young man I once believed would carry his father's integrity into the world. But then another memory cut through. Daniel standing in this very doorway, telling me I had no place here. I gripped my cane tighter. "Daniel, I can't speak for you. Your actions already did." Caroline touched my elbow, steady and quiet. "Margaret, don't let guilt blur the lines. Justice doesn't bend for blood." Daniel's face twisted, desperation written across it. "Mom, I was trying to protect us. I thought." "No." My voice was sharp enough to silence him. "You weren't protecting me. You were protecting yourself. There's a difference." An agent gestured for him to step forward. Daniel hesitated, then finally obeyed, his shoulders slumping as the cuffs clicked shut. Watching my son led away in handcuffs felt like my heart was being torn in half, but I knew this was only the beginning of the reckoning. And the darkest revelations still waited in the shadows. The detention center interview room was colder than a January night in Atlanta. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, reflecting off the steel table where I sat with Caroline at my side. My hands trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from the storm I knew was coming. The door opened. Daniel shuffled in, his prison-issue khakis wrinkled, his face pale and hollow. Gone was the confident son who once strutted through corporate boardrooms. This was a man stripped bare, a man who had nowhere left to hide. "Mom," he whispered, lowering himself into the chair across from me. I swallowed hard. "Daniel." For a moment, silence filled the room, just a mother and son staring at each other across a gulf deeper than any ocean. Finally, he broke. "I never wanted it to go this far. Vanessa, she said it was temporary. That her parents just needed a place to stay until they got settled." I thought. "You thought what?" I cut in, my voice sharp. "That evicting your mother from her own home was a kindness? That draining my accounts was a family favor?" His eyes glistened. I was in too deep. Vanessa's father had me tangled in investments I didn't understand. By the time I realized they were scams, they had leverage on me. If I didn't play along, I would have lost everything. Caroline leaned forward. "So you sacrificed your mother instead?" Daniel dropped his gaze, shame radiating from him. I thought I could control it. Keep it from getting out of hand. But then the papers, the accounts, it was like a flood I couldn't stop. I stared at him, torn between anger and grief. You didn't just fail me, Daniel, you failed yourself. Your father raised you better than this. At the mention of James, Daniel's shoulders shook. I know, he whispered, his voice breaking. But before I could ask him the question that haunted me most, whether he knew about the darker, deadlier parts of their scheme, the door swung open with urgent news that would change everything. The door creaked open and Agent Rips stepped inside, her expression tighter than a banker's purse string. She set a manila folder on the table, sliding it toward me as if it carried dynamite. Mrs. Cole, she said carefully, we've uncovered new evidence in Dallas tied to the Moors. You need to see this. Caroline flipped the folder open. My stomach lurched. Photographs, grainy, but clear enough, showed me. Unconscious in a hospital bed. Tubes in my arms. Machines humming. My body pale under thin white sheets. I felt the air leave my lungs. Where did these come from? Rip's jaw tightened. They were found in Edward Moore's office, along with copies of your medical records. Caroline's face drained of color. Those records should have been sealed at Phoenix General. Someone inside the hospital helped them. I gripped the edge of the table. Why would they want pictures of me like this? Rips hesitated, then pulled out another page. Because, Mrs. Cole, your medication orders were altered. The dosage increased. Infection risks introduced. We believe your prolonged recovery may not have been an accident. The room spun. Caroline's hand shot out to steady me. But I barely felt it. You're saying? My voice was a whisper. You're saying they tried to kill me? Or at least delay your recovery long enough to finish their scheme. Rips said grimly. But yes, we're investigating possible attempted homicide. Daniel shot upright, panic flooding his face. No, I didn't know anything about that. Mom, you have to believe me, I would never. I turned to him, my heart splitting all over again. Would you, Daniel? Would you really never? Or is that just what you're telling yourself so you can sleep at night? The fraud had been monstrous enough, but now, there was evidence they had tampered with my very life. And the question tearing me apart was this: had my own son been part of that plan? Daniel's face collapsed in on itself, as if my question had hollowed him out. His hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly I thought the cheap metal might bend. Mom, he whispered, shaking his head, I swear to you, I didn't know. I thought it was just money. Just papers. I never imagined. His voice cracked. God, what have I done? Agent Rips watched him carefully. Pen poised over her notes. Mr. Cole, the evidence doesn't yet place you at the center of the medical manipulation. But your signature does appear on a life insurance policy taken out in your mother's name. 6 months ago. Beneficiary. You. My blood turned to ice. Daniel's eyes widened in horror. What? No, that was Veronica. She handled all the insurance. She said it was just updates. I signed whatever she put in front of me. Caroline's voice cut like a scalpel. Do you realize what that means, Daniel? Either you were complicit, or you let your wife forge your future with your mother's death. Daniel buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook, but not with anger, with something closer to despair. I was a coward, a weak man who couldn't say no. But I didn't want you dead. Mom, you have to believe me. I stared at him, my heart battling itself. I wanted to cling to his words, to believe there was still some piece of the boy I raised left inside him. But the betrayal ran so deep. It was hard to tell truth from survival instinct. Belief, I said slowly, my voice trembling, isn't something you demand. It's something you earn. Daniel lifted his head, eyes red. Then let me earn it. I'll tell you everything, every meeting, every forged document, every lie they spun. I'll testify against all of them. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw not just my broken son, but a man cornered, desperate to claw his way back to the light. The question was, would his testimony save us, or destroy us all? The conference room went silent after Daniel's vow. Even Agent Rips paused, studying him with that sharp, assessing gaze she usually reserved for suspects who were on the edge of breaking. Gloria leaned forward, Her lawyer's tone calm but firm. Daniel, understand what you're saying. If you testify, you're not just giving up Veronica and her parents. You're exposing yourself. Every fraudulent transfer, every misuse of power of attorney, every forged signature, those all lead back to you. I know, Daniel said hoarsely, his voice steadier now. I deserve the consequences, but Mom doesn't. None of our neighbors do. If my testimony helps bury the Sterlings, then maybe, just maybe, I can start making things right. I sat frozen, staring at him. This was the son I remembered, the boy who once returned a lost wallet with every bill intact. Even though he had no lunch money that day. But now, that same boy was buried beneath layers of deceit, selfishness, and weakness. Was this confession his first step back, or just another performance to save himself? Agent Rips broke the silence. If you cooperate fully, the prosecution may consider leniency, but you should prepare for prison time. Mr. Cole, serious prison time. Daniel nodded, almost with relief, as if punishment itself felt like absolution. My voice was softer than I intended. And when you walk out of prison, Daniel, what then? What kind of man will you be? He lifted his gaze, meeting mine without flinching. The kind Dad wanted me to be. The kind you taught me to be, before I lost my way. For the first time in weeks, my chest ached not just with grief, but with something dangerously close to hope. But hope is fragile, and in cases like ours, it can shatter with a single revelation. And that revelation was waiting just outside the door. In a manila folder Agent Callahan carried into the room. Agent Callahan slid the manila folder across the table. His face was unreadable, but the weight of what he carried made the air in the room feel heavier. These, he said, tapping the folder with 2 fingers, are communications recovered from Veronica's encrypted email. They were buried deep, routed through multiple dummy accounts. But our cyber team cracked them last night. Gloria opened the folder with practiced care, scanning the first page before her lips tightened into a thin line. She handed the document to me. My hands trembled as I read. It was a chain of messages between Veronica and her parents, cold, calculated, methodical, and then I saw my name. Not just my house, not just my accounts, me. Subject, contingency plan. The header read. Beneath it, Veronica's words leapt off the page. If Isabella doesn't survive surgery, accelerate timeline immediately. Use Richard as beneficiary proxy. He'll be too blind with guilt to resist. The blood drained from my face. I had suspected cruelty, but not this level of premeditated malice. Not the possibility that my death had been penciled into their schedule like a business meeting. Daniel leaned forward, his voice breaking as he read over my shoulder. Mom, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know this. I looked at him, my eyes searching for even the smallest flicker of deception. But all I saw was devastation. A son realizing he'd been nothing more than a pawn in his wife's monstrous design. Gloria's voice was steady, though her knuckles whitened around her pen. This changes everything. With these emails, the prosecution can pursue not only fraud and elder abuse but potentially attempted homicide. Daniel buried his face in his hands. My God, what have I done by standing beside her all these years? I closed the file with shaking fingers. My heart pounded, not just with anger, but with something sharper, resolve. Because if Veronica and her parents had truly plotted my death, then this fight wasn't just about reclaiming my home anymore, it was about survival. Justice, and ensuring they never harmed anyone again. The room seemed smaller after that revelation. The fluorescent lights too harsh. Every shadow too sharp. I felt Daniel's eyes on me. Pleading, broken. But my gaze stayed on the folder. Those pages weren't just evidence, they were a mirror of how far betrayal could go when greed ruled the heart. Gloria placed a hand on mine, grounding me. Isabella, this case will set precedent. Elder abuse, financial exploitation, conspiracy, it's all here. But this, she tapped the file, this is the nail in their coffin. Daniel's voice wavered. Mom, I can't erase what I did. But I can make sure they pay for every crime. Let me testify. Let me help end this. I studied him for a long moment. My son, the boy who once held my hand crossing the street. who begged me to read just one more story at bedtime, was now a man who had betrayed me in ways I could never have imagined. And yet, in his brokenness, there was truth, a painful, imperfect truth. "I will not protect you from justice," I said quietly, every syllable sharp with resolve. "But if you truly want redemption, start here. Tell the truth, all of it." Tears slid down his face. Silent, unguarded, for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the faintest crack in the icy wall around my heart. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the first fragile step toward something else. Gloria closed the folder with a decisive snap. Then it settled. "We'll give the prosecution everything." As we left the room, I caught my reflection in the observation mirror, a woman marked by betrayal, scarred by cruelty, but standing unbroken. That night, sitting on the porch of my reclaimed home, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The roses in the garden were blooming again, stubborn and defiant. Just like me, life will always test the limits of our trust. Sometimes, the deepest wounds are inflicted not by strangers, but by those we love most. But betrayal, no matter how devastating, doesn't have to define us. It can shape us, sharpen us, and remind us that dignity, justice, and resilience are stronger than greed. We cannot choose the family we are born into, but we can choose the values we stand by, and those values will outlast any betrayal. Because in the end, the wicked may win for a season, but truth has a way of finding its voice. And when it does, it shatters lies, reclaims justice, and lights the path forward.